The massive wooden doors of the courtroom groaned open, and instantly every single head snapped toward the entrance. Diddy walked in, the soft clinking of his shackles echoing like a haunting reminder of how far he had fallen. His prison uniform hung loosely on his body, weighed down by sleepless nights and unspoken fears. His eyes were swollen red, his jaw clenched tight, yet he still forced his posture to hold some shred of dignity. The room was dead silent except for the faint hum of the ceiling fans above, a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush the very air out of your lungs. Every lens in the back of the courtroom zoomed in, hungry to capture the moment. Reporters leaned forward, pens hovering over notepads, knowing this scene could define the rest of Diddy's life. High above, the judge sat perched, flipping through a thick stack of documents with deliberate slowness, her face carved in stone, showing not a single flick of emotion. Diddy's eyes darted across the room. To his left, the prosecution sat cold and ready, their files stacked like ammunition. To his right, a handful of supporters clung to the fading hope in their eyes, though even they looked like their faith was beginning to crack. Taking a slow breath, as though trying to inhale the last fragments of freedom from the stale courtroom air, Diddy shuffled forward. The faint clink of his chains followed him like an echo of judgment until he reached the defense table and sat down. His hands gripped the edge so tightly that his knuckles turned bone-white. The gavel lifted, just slightly, but even that subtle motion sent chills down every spine in the room. Diddy's lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently in his ear, but Diddy's gaze never shifted. His lips moved silently, rehearsing words he knew might be his final chance, his last card to play in a game that could end with sunlight or steel bars. The air thickened, pressing down like a weight on every chest. Finally, the judge looked up. For the first time that day, her eyes met his. Cameras clicked like gunfire, capturing that single glance that carried the weight of the entire trial. This wasn't just a court hearing anymore. This was the spectacle the world had been waiting for. Diddy's lawyer rose slowly, straightening his tie as though it could shield him from what was about to come. The room froze, tension drawn tight to the wire about to snap. Diddy refused to look at the crowd. He ignored the reporters itching to seize every flicker of emotion. His stare was locked only on the judge, unblinking, desperate, searching for any sign of empathy. Across the room, the prosecutor leaned forward, her lips curling with the faintest smake, as if she could already taste victory. Her body shifted, ready to unleash the cold precision of her attack. But before a single word could leave her lips, the judge raised a hand, stopping her cold. The judge's gaze swept across the room, lingering on Diddy, before shifting to the empty jury box. It was a silent reminder to everyone. This wasn't about spectacle anymore. This was about the law, the truth, and a man who had been waging a battle that looked destined to be lost. Diddy's breathing grew heavier, not because he lacked air, but because every second felt stretched into an eternity. The faint shuffle of papers, the soft clicks of pens, it all pierced his nerves like a steady drumbeat. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, meant as reassurance, but instead it only seemed to make him tense more. Finally, the judge's voice cut through the silence, calm but sharp as a blade. "Mr. Combs, this is your opportunity. If there's anything left you wish to say before my decision is rendered, now is the time." For a long, frozen moment, he didn't move. The weight of her words pinned him in place. Then, slowly, Diddy rose to his feet, the clinking of his chains rolling through the courtroom like distant thunder. Instead of looking at the judge, his gaze drifted to the gallery. His supporters leaned forward, some with tears welling, others clutching each other's hands as if bracing for an unseen impact. His voice, when it finally came, was low but steady, each word heavy, deliberate, reaching beyond the four walls of that courtroom and out into the world. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every twitch, every pause, every drop of emotion. For a few unbearable seconds, nothing came out. Only the rise and fall of his chest, every breath carrying the weight of his downfall. His eyes flickered toward the floor, then back to the bench. And for the first time in the entire trial, the mask slipped. Gone was the untouchable mogul. What remained was a man stripped bare, fighting to hold himself together as his voice finally cracked into the open. "I'm not here to deny my past," he began, his tone trembling but growing stronger with every word. His hands gripped the defense table, knuckles turning white. He looked like a man walking a tightrope between defiance and surrender, one wrong word away from the abyss. The judge leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable, studying him like a puzzle only she could solve. The entire gallery sat frozen, not a cough, not a shuffle, reporters suspended mid-scribble, waiting for the next line to land like a hammer. Diddy's voice steadied. I've been called a lot of things in my life. A star, a businessman, a villain, but I've never been called a man who quit. His voice climbed, emotion breaking through. And I'm not quitting now. Not on my family, not on my children, and not on myself. A murmur rippled through the crowd, quickly silenced by the judge's piercing glance. Across the aisle, the prosecutor's jaw tightened, her eyes flickering with something unreadable, doubt, calculation, maybe both. Diddy shuffled forward slightly, the shackles at his ankles clinking softly, echoing louder than they should have in the silence. I know I've made mistakes. Mistakes that have hurt people. Mistakes that have hurt me. But this doesn't have to be the end of my story. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating, as if the entire courtroom had forgotten how to breathe. Every eye was locked on the judge, searching for the slightest crack in her stone-cold mask. But she didn't flinch. Her gaze bore into Diddy with the precision of a surgeon, stripping away any shield he thought he still had left. His chest rose and fell rapidly, each shallow breath echoing louder than the chains at his ankles. The silence wasn't just silence. It was a cage, and everyone inside could feel the steel bars closing tighter with each second. Across the room, the prosecutor leaned forward, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Her fingers tapped a rhythm on the table, not out of nerves, but with the calm confidence of someone who believed the end was already written. She was ready to strike, ready to dismantle every word he had just pleaded. But then the judge shifted in her chair, the wood creaking in a way that sent a shiver through the gallery. Diddy's eyes locked on her instantly, desperate for signal, any sign, that his words had found their way past the armor of the bench. Instead, her gaze fell to a single sheet of paper. The room tilted. Was this it? A verdict? A sentence? Or another cruel delay designed to break him piece by piece? Diddy's lawyer leaned close, whispering quick words into his ear. But Diddy didn't move. His focus was unshakable, fixed only on the woman whose decision would either shatter him or spare him. Behind him, the gallery was a battlefield of emotions, supporters clutching tissues, critics leaning in like wolves smelling blood. It didn't feel like justice anymore. It felt like the final moments of a hunt. Every second was dragged out, stretched thin until it burned in the lungs of everyone present. Then the judge finally raised her eyes, scanning the room before pinning them back on Diddy. No gavel slam, no raised voice, just a stillness more terrifying than a scream. When she finally leaned forward, her voice was so measured it made the skin on every neck crawl. Mr. Combs, before I make my decision, there is something you need to hear. The air was sucked from the room. Even the prosecutor froze, her smirk slipping for just a second. The gallery erupted in hushed whispers, quickly silenced by the weight of the moment. Diddy straightened in his chair, hands gripping the defense table until his knuckles turned white. Inside his head, every memory, every mistake, every word of his plea replayed in rapid fire. The silence wasn't just quiet now, it was suffocating. You could hear hearts pounding. A cough from the back row cracked like a gunshot. The judge's pause was deliberate. Her eyes flicked toward the prosecutor, just for a heartbeat, and that tiny gesture sent shockwaves through the gallery. Whispers rippled like sparks. The prosecutor leaned back, folding her hands as if she'd been waiting for this moment all along. Diddy's lawyer muttered again, urging him to stay calm, but Diddy didn't move a muscle. Every nerve in his body was locked on the judge's lips, bracing for whatever storm was about to break. And then, without even glancing at her notes, the judge began. Her voice wasn't loud, but every syllable sliced through the tension like a blade. Mr. Combs, this is not the first time you stood before this court asking for another chance. Diddy blinked, his jaw clenching tight. This wasn't just about today. She was reaching back into his past. His shoulders stiffened as if he already knew what was coming. You've built a career on influence, on power, and yes, on the loyalty of those who believed in you. But this court cannot ignore the record before it, the evidence, the history. Years of his past were being dragged into the present, years that were about to be used against him in the one moment he needed mercy the most. Somewhere in the gallery, someone sucked in a sharp breath, the sound echoing in the silence like a warning bell. The prosecutor's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. For the first time all day, Diddy's gaze faltered from the bench. He stared down at the table, his faint reflection staring back at him from a polished wood. Was this it? Was this the moment the fight ended? The judge leaned back slowly, her face unreadable, but her posture carried one clear message. She wasn't finished. Not even close. Her words returned with surgical precision, cutting deeper than before. You speak of change, Mr. Combs. You speak of redemption. But change is not measured in promises made under the shadow of consequence. It is measured in the choices you make when you believe no one is watching. A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. The prosecutor shifted forward, eyes locked on the bench, ready for the blade to twist. Diddy swallowed hard, fighting to keep his breathing steady. His chest felt heavy, as if the very air in the room had turned against him. The judge opened the document with deliberate care, each page turned like the ticking of a clock running out. This court has reviewed the statements, the testimonies, and the history that precedes this case. Her words lingered, heavy enough to crush the silence. Then her eyes locked on Diddy's, sharp as steel. And what I see is a pattern this court cannot ignore. His fingers twitched against the table, his lawyer's silent plea, "Stay calm, don't react," echoing beside him. But inside, a storm was raging. Headlines, accusations, betrayals, all of it came flooding back under the gaze of strangers who would decide his fate. The judge's tone tightened, striking with the weight of years. Your influence may have shielded you from full accountability in the past. But this court is not here to be swayed by fame, by fortune, or by the echoes of your legacy. The words hit like hammer blows. Even the reporters paused, pens frozen mid-air. Diddy clenched his jaw, but his eyes flickered toward the gallery where a handful of familiar faces stared back, unreadable. The judge closed the file with finality and placed it on the bench. This decision will not be made on the strength of your plea alone. It will be made on the truth of your actions, past and present. The sentence landed like a verdict before the verdict, and the air in the courtroom grew suffocatingly small. Then came the voice that Diddy feared most. The prosecutor rose with calm intensity, her words sharp enough to slice the silence. Your Honor, this is not about a man who made one mistake. This is about a man who has lived in the shadows of his influence, escaping the consequences every other citizen would face. She stepped toward the evidence table, each click of her heels echoing like a countdown. And today, those shadows disappear. Diddy's hands curled into fists beneath the table, his knuckles bleaching white. The prosecutor reached for a large sealed envelope. The gallery collectively leaned forward as she broke the seal, pulling out a stack of glossy photographs. Holding them high, she declared, "These are not rumors. These are not whispers in the media. They are proof of a history he has spent years trying to bury." She laid the photographs onto the evidence screen one by one. Each image illuminated on the courtroom monitor, each one heavier than the last. Gasps exploded across the gallery. Even seasoned reporters shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the photos and Diddy's face. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but the words barely cut through the pounding of his heartbeat. The judge studied the images with a usual unreadable calm, but there was a flicker, a slight tightening of her jaw. Diddy saw it, and it was enough to tell him what he feared most. The tide was turning, but not in his favor. The prosecutor's voice grew sharper. This is the real story. This is a man behind the music, behind the fame, behind the image. And Your Honor, we cannot in good conscience grant him one more chance, not when he has wasted so many already. The words lingered in the air, thick as smoke. The gallery sat frozen, caught between shock and anticipation. Diddy shifted in his seat, but there was nowhere left to look, nowhere left to hide. Every eye was fixed on him, waiting to see if he would shatter before the judge delivered her final strike. At the bench, the judge's fingers tapped once, twice, against the wood. Barely audible, but enough to silence the entire courtroom. The decision was coming, and everyone in that room knew it. Then, without warning, the judge leaned forward. Her voice was low, almost calm, but every word landed like a stone. "Mr. Combs, I have listened. I have watched. And I have waited to see something in you, anything, that would convince me you deserve what you're asking for." The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Diddy's chest tightened, his body leaning forward ever so slightly, as if trying to bridge the gap between them. But the judge's eyes never softened. What I've seen is not a man seeking redemption, but a man seeking escape. Her tone sharpened, cutting deeper with every syllable. You speak of second chances, but your past is littered with the rubble of the first, the second, the third. Each time you walked away believing the system would bend again in your favor. A murmur rippled through the spectators. The prosecutor allowed herself the faintest smirk, but Diddy's lawyer shot to his feet, only to be silenced by the judge's raised hand. Firm, unshaken. I've heard enough. She reached for the gavel, her eyes locked on Diddy's face. This court will not be swayed by emotion, by reputation, or by wealth, and certainly not by the tears of a man who only sheds them when the walls close in. The crack of the gavel shattered the silence, echoing like a gunshot. Gasps tore through the gallery. Some cried out. Diddy's head dropped into his hands, shoulders trembling, as though the weight of the moment had finally broken him. The judge rose from a bench, her black robe sweeping behind her. She didn't look back, not once, as every camera in the room followed her. The bailiff's hand hovered near Diddy's arm, the silent command clear. It was time to rise, time to face the reality carved into law. For a moment, Diddy didn't move. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but the words drowned beneath the pounding in his chest. Slowly, he lifted his head, blinking against the blinding flashes exploding from every direction. His lips pressed together so tightly they shook, but no words came. There would be no deals, no miracles, no one more chance. The judge had left the room. The prosecutor quietly gathered her files, victory written not in her smile but in her silence. Around them, the gallery erupted into hushed whispers. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others simply stared. The bailiff stepped closer. The cold click of steel cuffs locking around Diddy's wrist sliced through the noise, a sound that carried more weight than any verdict. He rose, shoulders slumped, as the cameras devoured every angle of his collapse. A flash caught his face just as he glanced back, one last look at the courtroom where it all ended. The reporter's questions hurled after him, unanswered, as the heavy side door closed with finality. Beyond that door, the world was waiting. Soon they would see the images, the downcast eyes, the sagging frame, the unmistakable look of a man who once called himself untouchable. And now, all that remained was silence and time. Time he could never buy.